because Christian McCaffrey, look, by any measurement, played well yesterday, but he wasn't great. That wasn't, of all the games that Christian McCaffrey will play this year, we will not talk about the game against Tampa ever again.
And here's the thing. I mean, I'll push back on that too. I watched that game from the binoculars in the upper deck. There were at least 5 runs where there was 0 hole, and somehow McCaffrey made something of it.
He does that every week.
He averaged 3.7 a carry, but man, the holes were not there.
No,
and as far as a receiver, they threw him 5 balls. He caught all 5. But including one for a touchdown.
He always does that. I mean, that's every game he plays. So it's just in all the games that he plays, I don't think there's a lot of memorable, but for the touchdown.
It's over 100 yards and a touchdown.
It is. But he does it every day. I mean, it's every game. I mean, that's all. Steph Curry hit 5 threes tonight. Every game. He does that every game. I thought the best play of the game all day long for the 49ers was that touchdown to McCaffrey from the 3-yard line, where Shanahan's got all the eye candy going to the left corner of the end zone, and Purdy comes out of the backfield through the A gap and is literally all by himself. I mean, that was about as clever of a design, making the linebacker bite on just the little stutter step that he gave to the left, and he comes back to the right. It was gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
But Christian McCaffrey, he's just, we're getting spoiled by him, right? We're getting spoiled by how good he is. And I actually thought that it was a game where Kyle tried to come out and play a little bit left-handed. McCaffrey didn't get a touch on that opening drive. It's got to be the first opening drive all year where McCaffrey didn't get a touch. Now, I'm sure he would have had it kept going, and maybe you could say, well, it didn't keep going and you got off the field because you weren't giving McCaffrey the ball. But then we saw Elijah Mitchell get several first half touches. It almost looked like he was getting a series there for a minute. Kyle hasn't shown us that any point in time in the year. And I thought, this bodes well to like maybe a 10, 12 carry day for Elijah Mitchell, because, Vita Vea is exactly the kind of guy you don't want landed on top of McCaffrey 9 times today. So maybe it's a day to get into that depth chart a little bit. Not really.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about that for a second, because he was asked the question about JP Mason, and he had a kind of a high profile exchange. And I think that Kyle has not been thinking of ways to get Mitchell going or get him off in any way. It was just about, you go in when we need you. So you're running a lot of times when everybody in the place knows we're going to run. So you're running the ball in many non-advantageous positions, and Kyle knew it. So I think he said, you know what? I'm going to run Mitchell a couple times in this game when nobody knows if we're going run or pass. And because I know this kid's a good running back, and I know he's looking better than the numbers show. And I think that's what that was about, because that was the first time we've seen Mitchell, I think, where it wasn't like, okay, they're running out the clock, and here's Mitchell preserving carries or preserving hits from Christian McCaffrey.
Right. First half carries. He's getting first half carries.
First half carries, and also in non-obvious running situations that could be run or pass. And sure enough, he averaged 6 yards a pop. He had a 13-yard run. He had 4 carries for 24 yards. So I think that was partly Kyle saying, hey, look, I put myself out there and told everybody that Mitchell is better than Mason. I've got to now, put Mitchell in a couple of spots for him to succeed so that people stop asking these questions. And I think that's what was going on there. Now, I personally would love to see Mason too, because I think Mason's, to me, he reminds me of a kind of a poor man's Marshawn Lynch. He's big and powerful and explosive and hard to bring down. And I agree that I'd love to see Mason out there, but Mitchell's struggles and his yards per carry are contextual, and Kyle knew it. And that's why he put him in a better context this week to actually have success, as opposed to Mitchell's been taking one for the team most times. And his numbers look awful, but it's mostly situational. Now he averaged 6 yards a carry. Now people are going to be like, oh, yeah, he looks pretty good.
Well, he had that spectacular rookie year, and then, the injury, then Christian McCaffrey, which means you hit the rear view mirror, and that's just the way it goes. He's a talented back. I just think that there needs to be somebody taking 10 carries every Sunday between now and the end of the year who's not named Christian McCaffrey.
I agree.
And that's just to preserve the guy named Christian McCaffrey, because Brock's been great. Brock's been historically good. Without Christian McCaffrey, should he get hurt, that's it, kids. That's where the year wraps up, right there in that injury. If there's ever if Christian McCaffrey is on a cart that isn't a golf cart at any point in time this year, ice cream carts and golf carts are the only carts. Mario Kart, the only carts I want around Christian McCaffrey. Carts are bad news. Seasons end on carts. And the 49ers season of trying to win a Super Bowl would end immediately should there be a cart coming for McCaffrey. So,
it's so funny because people always talk about next man up. But the reality is the NFL is football's a violent game. Guys go down, but it's about who is the next man up. Have you ever seen Nick Saban in a post-game presser talking about an injury? Nobody seems more unaffected than him. Why? Because the next guy up's a 5-star, who's promising to be even better than the last guy. Same with Kirby Smart in Georgia. We lost this guy to an injury. Yeah, okay, it's really bad, but we got this guy coming in. I mean, the next guy up is so the depth at Georgia, LSU, some of these, Alabama, Ohio State, it's endless. So these guys are not worried. In the NFL, was it bad to lose Afonga yesterday? Yeah, it was really bad. But guess what would make it really worse is if you didn't have Jair Brown, because you can say next man up for anybody, but if the next guy up is a glorified special teamer who's borderline NFL, then you're screwed. But if the next guy up is a future starter, maybe Pro Bowler in the NFL, you're not screwed. So it's about knowing the talent. And like Seattle, Niners play Seattle on Thanksgiving, a couple days from now. Seattle lost Kenneth Walker. I don't know if you watched that game yesterday. He suffered a significant oblique injury that's going to keep him out Thursday night. So it's next man up. Now, if they didn't draft the UCLA kid, Zach Charbonnet, they'd be cooked. But instead, they've got Zach Charbonnet, and Charbonnet, I think, is probably pretty comparable to Kenneth Walker, so they're not cooked. And they're going to fire a significant effort on Thursday night. But if the next guy up was some special team guy who covers kicks, they would be screwed. So next man up sounds good, and next man up, it's about who is the next man up.
Well, and it's also it's what did the guy who went down do? I mean, next man, this is probably the wrong year to do it, because the next man up in this scenario is Chris Paul, which is a pretty good scenario still. But, you take Steph Curry off the Warriors, they become like a near non-functional basketball team, right?
Right.
And so, that it's even though the next man up is also going to the Hall of Fame, it's still not Steph Curry. No one does what that guy does. No, as good as Elijah Mitchell could ever be, no one does what Christian McCaffrey does. You talk about, the slivers that he got through, and he goes through those every week. It's the old Vince Lombardi run to daylight. This guy runs to slivers of daylight, and he comes out of them, and he's remarkable. McCaffrey's like an accordion. He can expand, he can get big, he can narrow himself up to slip through a crack. He can stiff arm anybody. He can pirouette around you. He can spin his way into the second level. I mean, the guy's just got moves on his moves on his moves on his moves. He's amazing. No one quite runs like him, and it's why he's leading the NFL in rushing, for goodness sakes. So he's so important to what this team does.